And now I'd like to welcome to the channel, Alan Taylor. Hey, Alan, thanks for joining me today.
Hey Kyle, how you doing? Thanks for
I'm
having me.
absolutely. So, I've talked with my followers for several years about interviewing Stan, and then I later learned about talking with you and your background. So I'm really excited to visit with you and talk about your background. Obviously, we'll talk about you being in charge of NASCAR security, but we have to go back to your previous career before you came to NASCAR, working as a Secret Service agent on the detail for President Obama and former President Obama and former First Lady Michelle Obama. So I have just a list of questions, but first I want to kind of get a sense of how did you get into the Secret Service? Because I know you were there for 27 years. So kind of tell me the story of how you got into the Secret Service.
Well, before the Secret Service, I was a security manager for Busch Gardens in Williamsburg, Virginia. And during my time there, we had a visit from the then Vice President Dan Quayle. 3 of his 4 years in office every Father's Day. He would come to his kids, and I got to know the Secret Service agents from the Norfolk resident office. And during that time period, they approached me and said, "Hey, would you be interested in applying to become a Secret Service agent?" And I had aspirations to go in federal law enforcement, and felt like it was a good opportunity for me to make that jump to federal law enforcement with that opportunity that was presented before me, and was fortunate enough to apply and get through the application process and to be accepted as a Secret Service agent.
Okay, so we'll obviously talk about the stuff working with the Obamas, but for 27 years you were there. So kind of can you give me some background on some of the work you did before working with the Obamas?
Well, the Secret Service goes on career tracks, and so being from Williamsburg, Virginia, when I first started, I was assigned to the Washington field office. And during that time period, which most people don't realize, the Secret Service investigates counterfeit money, which is why the agency was actually created, and to include credit card fraud, bank fraud, identity theft, computer fraud. Um, and obviously, in addition to that, we work in the threats against our protectees. So it's a wide-ranging financial crimes investigations that we handle. And so as a field office, you handle all those things working with your local law enforcement partners, your state law enforcement partners, and your federal law enforcement partners, and working in various financial crime cases. In addition to that, we're having field officers all around the world. We also have an opportunity when you have a protection detail that comes to your district, you work with them and making sure that protective plan is put in place for the visit of the protectee to your area. And you have the familiarity with the local law enforcement, with the environment that they're coming into or have you. So you are like the liaison and go between the local law enforcement and the Secret Service agents that comes from DC to make sure that the visit goes smoothly when the protectee arrives. So in the field office, you're doing a variety of things, which makes you more well-rounded at knowing what the agency does as a whole. It's not just about protection.
Sure.
And our philosophy has always been that a good investigator makes a good protection agent, just based on having the instinct and the knowledge base of what you're looking for when you're doing an advance of a hotel or restaurant or whatever the case may be. The things that need to look for that may look off if you're looking at something and what have you, putting together a security plan.
So I have this question here, and you kind of just talked about it. So people think Secret Service work is all action, but I'd imagine the real skill is preventing problems before anyone knows that they existed. So can you give me an example of what success looked like in your world?
Success was like it's a zero fail mission. And so success was like if I was a site agent, having a protectee come to your site, they're able to conduct their business unencumbered, with no interruptions, no issues, and leave safely during that time period. So it's and being that zero fail mission, the pressure's always on for perfection every single time, every day, all the time. And so that does each time that you accomplish that, no matter if it's from from the president of the United States to the vice president to a world leader. You have that sense of accomplishment every single time that you do that.
That's fascinating. So, in Becoming, the documentary about former First Lady Michelle Obama, and you had a big part in it when I watched it recently. So, there's a moment where the dynamic between you and her feels almost familial, like family after 12 years. So, at what point did the relationship from protectee and agent to something more human? And how do you professionally manage that line?
Well, it happens over time, and it's one of those things that as you are around the staff, the protectee for long periods of time, when you're traveling together, you get to know each other behind the scenes, so that you kind of like behind the scenes you can relax a little bit when you're on the plane or in the back of the house or what have you. You can relax a little bit and you interact with each other, and then it doesn't happen. It happens organically over over a length of time where you get to know each other, and being able to separate the two is when it's time to have game face on out in public or what have you versus behind the scenes when everybody can relax a little bit because of the pressures of the job, the
Sure.
pressures of being first lady, the pressures of staff, they need to do, the pressures of the Secret Service doing they need to do. So when you have that opportunity, such as a plane ride, to go to relax and decompress a little bit, that allows for you to be able to get to know each other and have that relationship. And and that it doesn't happen obviously with everyone, but sometimes you do have that connection, make that connection. And I was fortunate enough to be in that situation, and not only with First Lady, but also with the staff. And so that was, and it's helpful because the thing about it is that when you are going to locations, and if you have to make a decision of, hey, this may not be a good situation, or we make some adjustments, then they trust you more, knowing that, hey, they have a better understanding of why you're doing things and how you operate.
Right. Well, and then I guess it becomes so close where they can convince you to go down a slide in the Great Wall of China, right?
Yeah, that was definitely a surprise. It was one of those things that she says, Alan, she wasn't planning to go down the slide at first. And once she saw the girls go down, she said, Al, I want to do that. And I said, okay, ma'am, let us put some things in place so that so we can do that. And most of it was just logistics at putting things together with our host country, and making sure that they were set down at the bottom. My agents were set at the bottom to receive us when they came down, and being able to get everybody else down ahead of us so that when we got down to the bottom, we could get in the cars and leave without having to wait for everybody else to come down behind us.
Right.
So that was definitely an experience that I will never forget for sure.
Yeah. And the photo reminds you of it. That's a great photo.
Yeah.
All right, Alan. So you were around for as you just described, some incredibly high pressure moments. But what was the funniest or most unexpectedly normal moment you ever witnessed inside that world?
I mean, there were several, um, but I think just watching them interact with citizens, like on road lines, um, seeing the reactions from people who would meet, the president or the first lady, and just they a lot of times people get overcome with emotion and just just the joy that people had having that interaction and being surprised and shocked for being able to be that close to them, be able to shake their hand and have that interaction. And it's one of those things that they really enjoyed the interaction with the people more so than people trying to get selfies and pictures and things like that. It's like you're having a conversation where the president of the United States or the first lady of the United States, and taking that moment. And in this age that we're in, where people have to like take a selfie or take a picture to prove it to your friends. In actuality, you shouldn't have to worry about proving to anybody you have that moment with somebody of that importance.
Yeah, so I mean, I think about your job, and you did this, you worked with on the Secret Service for the president from, or for the first lady from 2008 to 2020. So 12 years. When you look back on your time doing that specific job, you think what?
It was a long time to be doing protection, which is not normal. But it was one of those things that it worked out well for the agency and it worked out well for the protectees. And and I was willing to make that sacrifice and be in that situation because I felt like I was making a difference. And when I felt like me being there was providing that continuity that they needed and enjoyed in their life for them to be able to have somewhat of a normal life as normal as it could be. And so I felt like, that's where I need to be, and that's where I wanted to be.
All right, so now let's switch gears and tell me about the transition to NASCAR and how that came about. And then I guess the bigger question is, were you a fan of NASCAR before that happened?
Now, that's a great question, actually, because I can tell you now, I was not a fan of
Okay.
NASCAR. It, I mean, obviously, I knew of NASCAR
Hmm.
as a kid. You only had three channels: ABC, CBS, and NBC. That was it. And I can remember on Sundays after coming home from church, and my dad would, you turn the dial and be on CBS, and you were watching NASCAR. And so I was, didn't realize at the time, I knew it was cars racing on the track, but didn't really realize anything about NASCAR. And as I grew up, never watched it on Sundays or what have you at all. And when it came time to retire, I was openly looking for a job, as I like to say, soft looking, because I was content where I was, but I knew it was time to move on, and I wasn't going to retire until I accepted a job somewhere else. And so, in looking for a job, I actually saw this job on Indeed, and so I applied for it, not knowing anything that would come of it, and so was fortunate enough to get an interview, and President Obama was very supportive of the whole process of when I mentioned to him that, hey, I'm looking to retire, I'm looking for a job, and what have you, and he was very kind and indicating that, hey, let me know if there's anything I can do to help. And so that meant a lot to me, that he was willing to do that, and two, that he was okay with me leaving and having been around for so long.
Right.
And so, um, so I was fortunate enough to get an interview, and get the job here at NASCAR, and very, very blessed to do that. And since being here at NASCAR, when I first came on, I have become a fan. And I tell people that I've become a fan, not because of the cars and the track or what have you. I've become a fan because of knowing everything it takes to get the car. From the team at the shop who's preparing the car every week, to the team in the garage preparing the cars for inspections every week, to the pit crew team that's getting the car ready, doing the race, and keeping the car on the track, keeping it going. To PR reps, everybody who's part of this team to make this car and this organization be represented on the track, big sponsors and all that stuff. And just seeing all those pieces come together, you can't help but become a fan, because it's very unique in professional sports to have something like that week in and week out, and for the length of time. It was one of the things that was surprising to me, of having so many weeks of racing, starting basically the end of January, beginning of February, going through November. It was very shocking for me, because I didn't, when I accepted the job, I really didn't realize, wow, that's a lot of races. It's one of the longest running professional sports every year, and
Right.
it's grueling to be on the road so much. And everybody that I bring to a racetrack, a lot of them all new fans, and to a T, not one has said they didn't like it.
Yeah.
Everybody has become a fan after I've walked into the track and showed them around, because they have the same take on things and understanding what it takes to get those cars on the track. week in and week out, and we can't help but respect that.
Sure, sure. So you spent 12 years protecting the Obamas. What did you learn about reading people in a room within 5 seconds that still applies every weekend in the NASCAR garage?
Body language. You can always tell people's intentions, first body language, and then once you have an interaction with them, by the tone of their voice. It helps you understand what their intentions are. Good, bad. Excited fan. You have excited fans like you have excited fans for I take these on a rope line. You have excited fans in the garage when dealing with the drivers and what have you. And it's just I'm a people person. The people in the garage will tell you that I'm very friendly and I like to talk. And so having that experience and being around people so much, then you do become aware of people's actions based on any number of things that they don't know that they're projecting that you're reading from them.
So when you moved from the White House environment into NASCAR, what surprised you the most about the security challenges of a sport that's this open and fan accessible?
I think that people, they take it for granted, all the hard work that goes into putting together a security plan week in and week out, every facility we go to. And at each facility, the track security managers are working very hard to prepare weeks before NASCAR gets here. And so I'm constantly having conversations and calls with these track security managers before we get there and helping them prepare for us being there. And so I think that it corresponds to like a Secret Service agent preparing for a visit to a location as you prepare weeks in advance before you get there, working with your local counterpart that's already on the ground there, and then putting things in place for you. So when you get there, you're fine tuning what they've put in place and just putting finishing touches on it to that things that you need to make sure are taken care of. So I think that people are would be shocked at the amount of resources that we're putting to securing the venues into these rooms.
So NASCAR fans really pride themselves, Alan, on access. You know this pit road, garage interaction, driver proximity. I mean, I always tell people it's remarkable how close people can get to the athletes right before they get into a car versus the NBA or NFL. You don't have that kind of access. So how do you balance maintaining that culture while also dealing with modern security realities?
Yeah, you're right. That was one of the things that I did find pretty amazing is how much access the fans had to the drivers
Right.
before. I mean, most athletes, they want to have meditation time and quiet time and what have you, get their mind right to strategize what we're going to do on the court, on the field, or on the track in this case, and being able to multitask, still having to have that coordination, which you can do on the track, but also take care of the fans. And I also realize that, the sport needs the fans. And so therefore, it's a balancing act of being able to have access, the drivers being accessed by the fans to be able to have that interaction and the security part of it, and just trying to make sure that the drivers, as being the fans that the drivers are interacting with, are basically screen fans, and so being in the vicinity where there's lots of drivers in one spot, we make sure we always are around to be able to react to those things. And it's one of those things I always say: security is everybody's job as well. It's not just NASCAR security, but it's everybody. It's team members that are around the drivers. It's their PR rep that's around the driver. They also act as security. And in some cases, even some of their own fans that see other fans that get out of line that may step in and say, hey, don't do that, or what have you. Be no respect for it. So it's a thing where everybody's part of the process to make sure that everybody's safe and secure. And so I think incorporating everybody into the plan is very helpful. And we rely on again our local law enforcement, our track security, to help us in making sure that the drivers are safe as we've been, that the fans are safe, and they're able to interact with each other without any issue.
All right, a couple more for you. You've worked at the highest with the highest levels of government and now one of the biggest sports properties in America. When you look back, what are you proudest of that nobody outside your profession would ever notice?
Um, I don't want to jinx myself. I, one of the things I pride myself on is that, um, you know, I work closely with not just within the NASCAR security team, but also with local law enforcement, with the track security, and making sure that everybody realizes that they are part of the team. It's not just about us, NASCAR, but it's they're a part of NASCAR by us being at their venue. And so them working with us, I want them to have the same pride and joy at having an event in their area and having nothing go wrong. And everybody's able to, the athletes, the drivers are able to go to drive and race, have a good race. Fans are able to come, have a great time, interacting with the drivers or fan zones, what have you. And also one of the things that I think is interesting is having the campers being able to come with their family and friends. Who, for a lot of them, it's an annual trip to the racetrack, and they're there for 4 or 5 days, and be able to have that interaction every day at the track as being part of that whole electric atmosphere for being a NASCAR race week. And it's not just a weekend; it's a week from the standpoint of that facility is programming events for the campers. Starting Wednesday, Thursday, all the way through Sunday.
Right.
So I think that that's part of what I like to see week in and week out. I think it's pretty cool. People don't realize they just see it happening, and not all that it takes to make sure that like that.
Yeah, it's a whole different experience. I've learned covering it for however many years. So I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about what the tragic news from last week and Kyle Busch and his passing. So I kind of want you, Alan, just to share maybe some stories. I know, obviously, several years ago, he was involved in a big security issue with him and Ricky Stenhouse. So maybe talk about that. I've talked with Stan about that. Talk about that, and just talk about Kyle Busch and your relationship with him.
I don't have specific relationships with any of the drivers per se. As I tell my team, it's one of those things that we're not here to be fans. We're here to do a job and keep them safe and make sure. However, if they come and speak to you and you talk to them, and it's basically speak when spoken to type moniker, because we don't want to be seen as being fans, and you don't want to get too wrapped into that environment of being a fandom. I mean,
Sure.
But and obviously it was very tragic events and shocking for everybody, and as security, we're here to help support the family, the team, and the organization in their time of need. And anything we can do to help support them at any level, both at track, personally, or have you through connections that we have that can take the burden off of them of anything that may need to be done based on our relationships that we have with people within the community where they may live to help them deal with such a tragic situation. Um, it's it was this is I've been with NASCAR now for this is my 6th season, and obviously I've never had to do anything like this in that time period. Hopefully God would do anything like this again while I'm here. But seeing how everybody comes together as a family, which I always I say that NASCAR was a family, and seeing everybody come together to support family on the team and the organization is very heartwarming at the end of the day. Being in this working together Obviously very competitive, but when it comes down to it, situations like this, you see the best of everybody uh, coming together and supporting, um, you know, the family and the team, organization, trying to get them, back forward and fucking ground. So tough circumstances. We should.
Yeah, it really was. Well, Alan, I want to thank you so much for taking the time to visit with me and talking about your career and the time with the Secret Service and working with the president and the former First Lady, and then your time with NASCAR. It's a fascinating story, and I think my followers will really find it interesting. So, again, thank you for your time, and I will see you down the road at the track. Actually, I'll see you at San Diego in a few weeks. So, thank you for your time. I appreciate it, sir.
Thank you. I appreciate it.